talk about how many jobs will be lost. How many jobs will be lost in Newcastle?
Well, one of the things that I would say is that businesses in Newcastle and the North East and more broadly are at various different states of readiness. Some of those companies which are fully ready see opportunities from the moment that we leave in order to be able to grow. One of the things that I hope we can work together on is making sure that all businesses recognise what it is that they need to do. That's why HMRC and others are, for example, automatically authorising EORI numbers and making it easier for people to take advantage of transitional simplified procedures.
Recognise that there will be dismay today amongst the UK oil refining sector at the government's announcement of its no-deal tariff plans, which removes the level playing field for their trade with the EU. So how does this government plan to support these very important strategic assets for the country?
Fred makes a very good point. It's important when we were looking at our tariffs to make sure that we did everything possible to ensure that prices remained low for consumers and for industry, but there are bespoke arrangements that we can put in place to support our refineries which do such an important job.
Lady Herman.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. Let me say very clearly to the Minister that the Prime Minister and his government will never be forgotten or forgiven for undermining the Belfast Good Friday Agreement, which has guaranteed peace and stability for all of us for the 21 years since it was signed. That agreement was endorsed in 2 referendums, one in Northern Ireland, one in the Republic of Ireland. Thousands upon thousands and thousands of people voted for those in those 2 referendums for the agreement. When is the Prime Minister going to feel honour bound to respect those referendums?
Well, my honourable friend knows that I have enormous respect for her, not just as a parliamentarian, but also because of a distinguished career in public service in Northern Ireland. I don't believe that it's the Prime Minister's intention for a moment to undermine the Belfast Agreement. And I know that she and I have we've had the opportunity to talk both in this chamber and outside about how important it is to support all those who believe in maintaining the gains of peace over the last 21 years. I don't believe it's the Prime Minister's intention to undermine at all. Far from it. We believe that the proposal that we've put forward is consistent with the Belfast Agreement, but I understand that there will be people of good conscience who may disagree.
Mr. Speaker, can I draw the Chancellor of the Duchy back to the opening part of his statement where he talked about the prospects for a deal? Can I just say that if the reports are accurate this morning about the call between the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of Germany, they are very worrying, because it cannot be the case that we can only leave the European Union by leaving part of our country behind. And that won't just mean that we won't get a deal by the 31st of October. It will mean that we won't be able to get a deal at all. So if that is the position, can I urge him with his Cabinet colleagues to hold fast to our position and urge our European partners to look at the Prime Minister's constructive proposals and negotiate them over the next couple of weeks so we can get a deal, and all those on the opposition benches worried about no deal will, I'm sure, be in the division lobby supporting it in due course.
Well, my right honourable friend makes a very, very important point. In the proposal that we've put forward, we've said that the people of Northern Ireland will be subject to the EU acquis as it applies to manufacturing goods and agri-foods. That causes some discomfort for some in Northern Ireland, but at the same time, the one thing that we can't accept is the idea that there should be a customs border inside our own country. There's no country on earth that allows a customs border to be erected between its own people. So therefore, if it is the case, and I haven't heard actually that it is, but if it is the case that any politician says that either Northern Ireland must stay in the customs union come what may, they're either saying that we should generate dynamic forces that separate our country, or that the UK can only leave the EU on terms that the EU dictates, and that can't be acceptable.
Single sentence questions, please. Angela Smith.
Speaker, the document makes it clear that environmental standards will be not only maintained but enhanced. A leaked DEFRA paper yesterday, written by civil servants, said that the DIT will push DEFRA to lower UK standards governing animal welfare and pesticide residues. Does that not indicate that this paper is not worth the paper? This document is not worth the paper it's written on.
As we leave the European Union, we're taking steps actually to improve animal welfare standards, not least by taking steps to end the live export of animals to Europe. And it's also the case that we're introducing legislation on everything from puppy farming to banning the use of primates as pets, which means that the UK, as a nation of animal lovers, leads the world in animal welfare.
Steve Double.
Thank you, Speaker. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that the Ben Act that was rushed through this House last month actually makes getting a deal harder for the government? And if we are forced to delay, not only will it extend the uncertainty for our businesses that want this matter resolved, it will simply mean we're having the same discussions we are today 3 weeks before the new deadline.
My honourable friend is absolutely right. I know there were good people who voted for the Right Honourable Gentleman's Act thinking that it would help the country. I don't, cast any aspersions on their motivation, but let's look at the consequences. The consequences of it are that it is more difficult to secure a deal. And as a result, I hope that all those who voted for it, and I respect their motivation, reflect on the position we now find ourselves in.
Mr. Speaker, as the 31st of October approaches, when will the government deliver on its promise to put in place a UK version of the current EU steel safeguards?
Short.
Steve Bryan.
Page 49. The government's permitted EU airlines to continue to fly to and from the UK until 24th of October 2020. What does the Minister envisage as the situation after that, given he rightly makes the point about business certainty? And what's the situation regarding new routes that may be opened up during that time?
I'm confident that on aviation we will make progress, but I understand the importance of it to my right honourable friend and his constituents.
Mr. Speaker, after 10 years of austerity, the Institute of Fiscal Studies figures show that we're back to square one with no discernible global financial crisis in place to explain the government's incompetent handling of the finances. Would any other government consider a no-deal Brexit with the finances in that state?
Business takes a variety of views on Brexit and indeed on no-deal Brexit, but I've yet to meet a single businessman, woman or organisation that thinks that a no-deal Brexit will be worse than a Jeremy Corbyn government.
John McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At a business event I held in my constituency, the feedback from local businesses was that the delay is more damaging, created by members opposite refusing to actually back the deal the government's negotiating than the current state of affairs. Does my right honourable friend agree with that?
Absolutely. We could have been out of the European Union with a deal if members opposite had backed the Prime Minister Theresa May in her efforts.
These references to named individuals are quite improper. The Right Honourable Gentleman no doubt luxuriated in the lather of the Oxford Union at which he excelled, and he excels in this House other than in that respect. He should wash his mouth out and not refer to named ministers by name, but by title, which he's well able to do. Caroline Lucas.
Speaker, the Minister isn't being straight with us. He has the gall to claim that UK environmental standards post-Brexit will be this beacon to the world, yet in reality he's planning to cut those standards. This document claims the carbon price will apply at a similar level to the EU ETS. That's what it claims. But on page 64 it makes it clear that actually the new carbon emission price, will be at about half the rate of the EU one. So if the government is going to cut incentives to tackle the climate crisis, will they at least be honest about it?
This government is one of the first to commit to net zero by 2050, and we're taking all the steps appropriate in order to ensure that we shift towards renewables and reduce emissions.
Would it not be better for my farming constituents today if the government would listen to the concerns of Minette Batters of the NFU about the tariff regime as a result of no deal, rather than allowing its advisers to blame the EU, blame everyone else and create new barriers to preventing a deal which the tone of last week was so determined to get?
Well, my right honourable friend is absolutely right. Minette Batters is a powerful and effective advocate for farmers in the UK, and she is right. I know from my previous job, I know from my role as a constituency MP, that the sector of our economy that faces some of the biggest challenges in the event of no deal is agriculture, and within that there are particular sectors that face particularly stringent challenges. I think it's important that the tariff regime that we've published today provides protection for some particularly vulnerable sectors, but there is more that requires to be done. done. And on his broader point about tone, I do believe that positivity and optimism are critical to ensuring that whatever noises off there may be, that we keep our eyes on the prize, which is a deal with the European Union.
Can I urge the Minister just to pause and reflect on the deliberate dog whistle briefing put out this morning by Number 10 against Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor, in the phone call, apparently as reported, between herself and the Prime Minister, which of course has then sparked a series of frankly racist attacks against the Germans from Leave.eu and others. This is an extremely dangerous course for the government to embark on, and I want to hear right now the Minister condemn it and distance himself from it.
Yeah, well, I'm grateful to the Honourable Gentleman for raising this. The first thing to say is that I wasn't in on that telephone call. The second thing I want to affirm is that the Bundeskanzlerin and the Federal Republic's government are good friends of this country. I had the opportunity to speak at the German Day of National Unity at the German Embassy last week, where I affirmed our commitment to friendship and the respect that we have for the German people, for their achievements since 1945 as a democracy that we can all admire. And I take this opportunity at this dispatch box to entirely dissociate myself from any sort of racist or demeaning language towards Germany. They are our friends, our allies, they're a great country.
I must say to the Chancellor of the Duchy, my sense is that that statement will be very warmly welcomed across the House, but also by a great many people outside of this place. Whatever their view about Brexit, it is important that decorous language is used, and the Right Honourable Gentleman has just been an exponent of it. Stephen Hammond.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I agree with my right honourable friend? As someone who voted for a deal 3 times, I'm pleased to hear that's still the government's policy. Many people beyond the 31st of October will already have travel plans in place. So on a specific point, notwithstanding point 4 on page 41 and the answers he gave to my right honourable friends, could he say how many reciprocal healthcare deals have been signed and how many memorandums of understanding are likely to be signed before October the 31st?
We do have reciprocal healthcare agreements with a number of member states, of which Spain is the most prominent, but we're working through each of the member states, and I will make sure that I will write to the Honourable Gentleman, not just with details of the arrangements that we've reached with every country, but also the steps that we continue to take in order to ensure that our citizens' rights are protected there.
On break.
The government's Business Readiness Fund, which sets aside just £15 million to help businesses, is going to be more than washed away by the cost to business, according to the FT, of £15 billion extra, 1,000 times more the cost to business. Is this just another example of the Prime Minister's attitude towards business?
This Readiness Fund has been well subscribed, including by organisations such as the IOD and the FSB, in order to make sure that businesses are prepared for life outside the EU. One thing I would say is that the Leave campaign made it clear, and people voted for us to leave both the single market and the customs union. Leaving the customs union means, yes, there are new customs procedures with the EU, but it also means there are opportunities to strike new trade deals with other countries and to be a champion for freer trade across the world. Freer trade reduces prices for consumers in this country and also helps the developing world. And I would have thought that supporting the poorest in this country and supporting the poorest globally would have recommended itself to the Liberal Democrats.
James Cartledge.
Thank you, Speaker. Can I ask my friend, what is the cash value of the support that he plans to make available in the event of no deal for agricultural and manufacturing businesses, specifically in terms of the impact they will receive from new export tariffs in that scenario?
My honourable friend makes a very good point. It's not just tariffs, and they will particularly affect some in the agricultural sector, but other events and other frictions which could have an adverse effect on specific businesses and specific sectors. That's why my right honourable friends, the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the Business Secretary, have Operation Kingfisher, which is a means of making sure that we can support any company that is fundamentally viable but experiences turbulence for a short period.
Barry Sherman.
Mr. Speaker, over the years I've become something of a Gove watcher. Could I say to the Honourable Gentleman, isn't it the fact that in his heart of hearts he really now knows that this country is being led to disaster, led by a man that he neither likes nor trusts?
No, I don't take that view. The Honourable Gentleman is an old friend, and therefore I take his comments in good part. But no, I admire the Prime Minister, and I know that what he's trying to do is what this government is trying to do, which is to honour the votes of his constituents so we can leave the EU.
Maria Caulfield.
Mr Speaker, for the Republic of Ireland, 3 million tonnes of their goods go to and from the EU via the UK land bridge, and without a deal they are liable to customs checks, tariffs and quotas. More than any other country, would the Minister agree that the Republic of Ireland's best interests are served if the UK leaves the EU with a deal?
My honourable friend and I both want to make sure that the Republic of Ireland is in the strongest possible position after we leave the European Union, and the best thing for the UK, for the Republic of Ireland, and for the many, many interests that we share across these islands is to secure a deal.
Hugh Gaffney.
Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister is planning to shift the UK away from the EU rules on the environment, safety standards and workers' rights in order to secure a trade deal with Donald Trump. Did the Prime Minister have any discussions with the TUC or any trade union, or have you yourself, Minister?
Can I say to the honourable gentleman that both he and I have been trade union members, both he and I have been involved in industrial action, both he and I know how important it is to uphold workers' rights, and I've had the opportunity to meet not just the TUC but other trades unions. My own view is that workers' protection matters and that we have actually higher standards of workers' protection than the EU mandates, and that will continue.
Richard Graham.
Mr Speaker, although this document does show the considerable work being done on the Chancellor of Duchy of Lancaster's watch, nonetheless it does reinforce his stated view that there is no good day for a no-deal Brexit. If the Labour Party agrees with him and me on this, then is it not time, given that they were all elected on a manifesto to respect the referendum result, for them to say we will avoid no deal by supporting the deal, and would that not help the negotiations in turn?
I think it would, and I think to be fair, that the attitude of EU member states and others towards the proposition we put forward would be, I hope, warmer and more flexible if they knew that it had support across the House. Now, the members of Parliament for Stoke-on-Trent Central and Stoke-on-Trent North issued a cautious welcome to this deal, as did the member for Aberavon. If that were the view of the opposition front bench, then I think it would be better for the whole country.
Yeah. Matt Weston.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I just pick up the point about this being a comprehensive summary? There's two sentences referencing border inspection posts, which will impact seriously our food and fish exports. There will be only 9, as I think the Secretary of State understands. That will lead to not hundreds of certificates being issued, but tens or hundreds of thousands. Does he agree we do not have the capacity in local authorities or vets to service that?
He makes a very important point. The key thing is that we will be taking a continuity approach towards the flow of goods into this country. We won't be administering checks to the for the EU when they export to us. It will be the case that the EU will, of course, at the moment, under its acquis, impose checks. But one of the things I should say is that, for example, the French authorities have ensured that the border inspection post for shellfish will be in Boulogne-sur-Mer. That means that fish which is caught in Scotland on Tuesday can be on sale in France on Wednesday without any impairment.
Single sentence questions. Jeremy Lefroy.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. On page 71, we see reference to transitional arrangements for the financial services which need to be in place by the 31st of October. How many of them are in place?
Almost all. There are still 1 or 2 statutory instruments that need to be passed.
Paul Sweeney.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Prime Minister assured me on Thursday that he would seek to engage with the Deputy Irish Prime Minister, Simon Coveney, over the concerns the Irish Government had over the veto, potentially, of a minority in Northern Ireland over the border arrangements. I was not able to get an update yesterday from the Under-Secretary of State. Can the Chancellor provide us with an update whether the Prime Minister sought those discussions or not?
I know that my honourable friend will write to the honourable member, but more broadly, one of the key things that the Prime Minister and others have said is that we need to secure consent in Northern Ireland for the arrangements in our proposals, but how we secure that consent is a matter for discussion.
Andrew Bowie.
Our honourable friend will recall 2 weeks ago, myself and other honourable members raised our concerns about the no-deal preparations being done by the Scottish Government. Has he had a chance to speak to the Scottish Government about our concerns just yet? And if he has, how much money that has been sent north has made its way to local authorities in Scotland that need to take relevant action?
Well, the Scottish Government have published this afternoon their own no-deal preparations, and I've scanned them in detail, and I can't see, actually, that money has gone to the local authorities most in need. A miserly £50,000 has gone to each local authority in Scotland. That is not enough to ensure that local authorities like Aberdeenshire have the capacity to issue the export health certificates that the fishing industry needs. And I'm deeply worried that the Scottish Government, despite containing many good ministers, is not passing on the money that we are giving to them for Scotland's citizens.
Page 153 is about preventing terrorism, preventing child abuse and preventing criminal gangs. And yet the document says there'll be a mutual loss of capability between the EU and the UK in the event of no deal. He's not going to let that happen, is he?
That's why we've written to Frans Timmermans in order to ask him to extend the access to the databases that we're currently allowed to access. And so far, Frans Timmermans has said no.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome the Minister's very welcome report and detail that he's provided? I have a simple question for him. He knows that I've been campaigning for citizens' rights. In the event of no deal, on exit day, those British citizens that are in the middle of treatment will only receive treatment for a further 12 months. Why can't we just provide healthcare costs to people that suffer from terminal cancer or MND who, through no fault of their own, find themselves in this position?
My honourable friend makes a very good point, and I will take it up with the Health Secretary in order to make sure that the support that we already give can be extended in precisely the cases that he mentions.
Sentence, Mr Wilson. Sammy Wilson.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The intransigence of the Irish Government and the EU has resulted in the very comprehensive proposals put forward by the Prime Minister and the compromises which had existed, which had required, being rejected. In light of that, would the Minister think again about his policy of not imposing duties on goods coming from the Irish Republic in order to protect producers in Northern Ireland and to put some pressure on the Irish Government to be realistic?
I entirely appreciate the force of the case that he makes, but it is our judgment that we should not impose additional checks or tariffs on goods coming from Ireland into the Northern Ireland.
In congratulating my right honourable friend for his documents and also his crisp and effective chairmanship of the daily XO committees, I notice that he talks about the environmental safeguards in great detail. Does he think, therefore, that the current desecration of the Covington Woods by HS2, despite the moratorium, might be better controlled after Brexit?
As one former member of this House said to a foreign potentate, I admire his courage, his strength and his indefatigability in being able to insert HS2 into every question, and he knows my views on that matter.
Martin Whitfield.
I'm grateful, Mr. Speaker. We spoke in the last questions about pallets, and I raise it again today because in the report recently published on page 113, the government indicates there must be compliance with ISPM 15 to export into Europe. But on page 115, they suggest that there may only need to be compliance with it. To help those who are trying to export on pallets that will be accepted, which is it?
Well, it would be prudent to make sure that pallets are compliant, but we point out that individual firms should contact the supplier or the Timber Packaging and Pallet Confederation, TIMCON, if they need more advice.
Kirsten Hare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Without access to tens of thousands of seasonal workers, our software industry in Angus and across the UK will suffer. So can my right honourable friend confirm that he recognises the importance of having a mechanism to be in place to ensure a smooth route for businesses to continue to function by having an access to labour in a no-deal situation?
Absolutely, and I think it's important that we look at the operation of the Seasonal Agricultural Workers Scheme and, if necessary, expand the numbers available to people in the soft fruit industry, for which my honourable friend is such a powerful advocate.
Order. I remind the House that only last week the Honourable Lady, the member for Canterbury, made a speech that brought hope and will have changed and will change lives. Colleagues, if you didn't hear it, you missed something. Rosie Duffield.
Thank
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In light of recent fake news from the Prime Minister about a shiny new hospital in Canterbury which currently has no A&E or urgent treatment centres, can the Minister please guarantee that with the resulting possible chaos of Operation Brook, my constituents will still be able to get to the William Harvey in Ashford for the urgent care that they desperately need?
I thank the honourable lady for her question, and would only underline your own comments, Mr. Speaker, about her amazing speech last week. We've been looking to make sure that we can accelerate the roadworks on Junction 10A in order to ensure that access to the William Harvey for the honourable lady's constituents and others can be uninterrupted, and I hope to be able to brief her and other Kent MPs on some of the other steps that we're taking in the next week.
Mr. Peter Bone.
Speaker, what date this month does the Secretary of State think it will be necessary to reach an agreement with the EU or notify the country, and in particular business, that there's going to be a no deal?
Well, I hope that we can make sufficient progress this week in order to be able to say at the EU Council that we have secured a deal. If we haven't secured a deal, then we will have to negotiate the legal framework that this House of Commons has put in place.
Alan Brown.
Does the fuel supply contingency programme that's mentioned on page 61 make special allowance for the predicted closure of 2 refineries, which was outlined in the Yellowhammer document? If not, why not? And when the government tell us what 2 refineries they think are at risk?
Well, there are 6 major refineries across the United Kingdom. There have been representations from the energy sector about our tariff regime, but we stand ready, and in particular the Business Secretary stands ready to support all of our refineries in the vital work they do.
Eddie Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the good people of Walsall North voted overwhelmingly to leave the EU, what role does my honourable friend think Walsall Council can play in ensuring they're as prepared as they can be for Brexit on the 31st of October?
They should pay attention and do everything that they're asked by the outstanding Member of Parliament for Walsall North.
There'll come a time when the right honourable gentleman will want the honourable gentleman's vote. Now, I don't know when that will be, but the time will come. The right honourable gentleman's got a new ambition. Ooh, it's percolating in my head. Mr. Peter Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I first of all, Mr. Speaker, indicate that with your permission, at the end of this item I intend to raise a point of order about comments made by the Chancellor early on, which were deeply offensive to me and to many others. But given the damage that's been done to relationships between the United Kingdom and Germany by the deliberate, malicious and almost certainly inaccurate leaking of a private phone call between the 2 heads of government, the next time he speaks to his very good friend, the Minister for the Cabinet Office, can he ask him how quickly we can be given a statement by the Cabinet Office that confirms that the suspect, there only are 2 possible suspects, that the culprit has been identified and removed from number 10 before they can do any more damage?
That's not a matter for me.
Order. Okay, let's start with Marcia Nicole.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It has come to light that the Department for Work and Pensions are issuing ill and disabled people with positive health guidance statements, asking them to describe their disability or health condition. In these statements, disabled people are being asked, and I quote, to avoid words that sound worse than they are, to describe their disability. This includes avoiding words such as chronic, degenerative or even depression. In essence, the DWP are encouraging disabled people to downplay their disability or health condition. Mr. Deputy Speaker, can you advise me on how the Secretary of State can come to this House and make a statement on this issue at the earliest convenience, as it cannot be right that a department is expecting disabled people to downplay their disability or health condition?
Can I first of all say, can I thank the honourable member for giving me notice of the point of order? As she well knows, it's not the responsibility of the Chair, but what we can guarantee is the bench has absolutely heard it, the government bench has heard what you've got to say, and I know that the honourable member will be coming back next Monday, and I'm sure that she will ensure that this House is aware and she will pursue it in the rightful way. Just bear with me. Dr Rupert Hope.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. On a point of order,